And g'day, mate. Oh, that felt so wrong. I did that just for Tassie Bob. Tassie Bob, g'day. Is this the top of the bottom of the morning? Oh, yeah, so where was it? Michael said, wow, I got a YouTube ad when the button was pushed. Yes. So I wanted to do an experiment, and apparently the experiment has failed. I will talk about that in a second. We'll get back to it. Before I get into anything else, I acknowledge the traditional owners of this land, the Whadjuk Noongar peoples. I pay my respects to their elders past and present, and to Aboriginal elders and peoples from other communities who may be taking part in this live stream today. So, what I did was, so every time I schedule a stream, the YouTube the wizard that you step through, it goes through several pages. It wants you to set up the thumbnail and info about it and schedule and all of that sort of thing. One of the pages is whether you want to turn on ads, like whether you want to monetize it. And I pretty much always say no, but it forces you to go through this. And what it does is if you select yes, it immediately proceeds. If you select no, you've got to like click through do you realize that if you do not accept this, then you will not be able to get, you know, all that sort of thing. They're really trying to push you to turn ads on. And I was wondering whether the video being shown or coming up in people's feeds or whatever depends on whether monetization is turned on. So this time I turned it on to see what would happen. And I didn't know whether it would do things like, a live stream is weird because you can't just throw ads in the middle of it. You could do it after, like in post-processing. If you're watching the stream back later and ads are turned on, then ads could be inserted into it. But with a live stream, if an ad goes in and it pauses the video, you end up out of sync. So I actually don't even know how they handle that. If they put an ad in before, does it delay it for everybody? I don't know. Yeah, Stephen says ads don't just make you money, they make them money and they want their money. Exactly. Yeah, that's the whole thing. That's the raison d'etre for YouTube, is selling us as consumers to advertisers. So, oh, Gavin said, let's see what ads get added in post. It'll be dependent on the viewer. It gets tuned based on the viewer's profile. Oh, Sion said, yes, it delays the stream. Oh, that sucks. Okay, so that's going to screw up synchronization. It's going to screw up chat. That is really bad. Yeah, okay. Tabari said, it's always in my feed and I always get a notification to start. That might be different for non-subscribers. I didn't get an ad because I'm a YouTube Premium member. Yeah, I have YouTube Premium as well. Every now and then I will somehow inadvertently watch YouTube from a different account or when I'm not logged in or something. And it's always shocking to be bombarded with ads because I just forget they even exist. I don't see ads at all on YouTube. So, yeah, it would be annoying. So, okay, because TTS is up and running. Hang on, is volume up? Yes, it is. Okay, so good morning to Jordan. Hang on, I'm getting TTS up. Is that going to work? Okay, Stephen W, Debray, John Whips, Michael Wires, Imi is here, Sharky, Johnny Bergdahl, Tassie Bob, Some Call It Fun, Sion is here, Gavin, Mitch, Amanda, Crispian, Any Mule, Stephen George, Gerald, Mlock789, Mr. Fixit is here, cool, welcome Mr. Fixit, Andrew Ruthven, David Kaiser, Tech Nebulous, Andrew Gordon, Jordan Reese, welcome everybody. Gerald said, YouTube is my prime entertainment, I don't mind paying for it.
Amanda Thompson said, good morning, John.
Good morning, Amanda. I can't remember how much YouTube Premium is. For me, it is it's not so much, it's partly entertainment, it's partly medication for my brain. Being able to have distracting things on, and it's also a way of getting information. Like I look up tutorials and I get a lot of how-tos and things from YouTube. So whatever the cost is, like just at a guess, say it's 15 bucks a month. For me personally, it is well worth it to pay for YouTube Premium. So, oh, Johnny says YouTube Premium is not cheap. Oh, Tessie Bob says 30 bucks something from memory. Wow. Mr. Fixit says $8 a month. I am getting some very conflicting numbers there. Stephen says it's more than 15. I wonder how dependent this is on where you are in the world, like if particular markets get it cheaper. Also, good morning to Wagon Loads, and Simon is here as well. Welcome, Simon. Are you watching satellites today while watching the stream? So, hang on. Gotta get that out of my throat. Gerald says $14.68 Canadian for me. Okay. Yeah, I haven't actually looked for a while. My memory tells me that it is something like 15 bucks a month that I'm paying, but I could well be very, very wrong. Okay, what I'm doing is pulling up something to have a look at. So we can look at this. How about we kind of stay on topic today? Or at least start on, maybe not stay on topic, but start on topic. Tassie Bob, my bank statement says $4.99, but that's what I pay for this channel. Well, oh, you got a paid membership. Thank you, Tassie Bob. I appreciate that. Michael says on topic, but you can't. I'm already off topic. I'm complaining about YouTube advertising right now. That was not the topic for the stream. All right, so let's try to find the topic somewhere in here. So, okay, the situation is I need to make progress on Testomatic.
Said, let's see how long staying in topic lasts.
Yeah, not very long to brace. This is Project Dopamine in a nutshell. I have so many projects that are like this, that are in this state where, look, you can see it. There is a PCB. It exists. Like that is not a render. I've built this physical thing. I've made the modules. This is
Outside
not...
the box said, squirrels was the topic.
Squirrels, yeah. This is something that I need to get into actual daily use, because we are still, when I say we, I mean Tom and I, are still using the V1 Testomatic prototype, the very first one that I built. It is sitting on the bench out there. We use it a few times a week on average. It's used for flashing firmware and things onto different target boards. But this version 2, so that, you can, in fact, there's the photo of it. That is the photo of the version 1 prototype, which is sitting on the bench out there right now with the label printer, and there's the touchscreen on the Pi, and the version 1 PCB for the Testomatic is in the back there. That thing that you see there, that is a water cannon motor controller board with a programming thing plugged into it. So we use it for that purpose. And that is what I want to replace, because I have this and I'm not even using it. I need to get the benefit from using it. But I'm in this situation where if I settle on a format now for things like these modules, that is going to be, what's the term? Metastasizing. It is going to be setting a precedent or a convention for some time to come. So I want to get it right. Hang on. Okay. That cough was so loud there was an echo in the room. So be glad that I hit the mute button. So what I need to do is finalize what's going on with these pluggable I/O modules. And the IOMOD, this thing here, we'll get back to that in a second. So I've already done a USB to serial module, I've done a CAN bus module. They're actually some, I had them out yesterday. They are done. So the I/O module, this is currently the impediment to going live with this thing, with the Testomatic, and it comes down to this particular chip, the AD5593R, which is a general purpose I/O driver chip with an I2C interface. So it can do digital in, digital out, analog in, and DAC. So a proper digital to analog converter output on all 8 pins. And so, yeah, every pin can be a 12-bit ADC, every pin can be a 12-bit DAC. So not just PWM, where you're square waving the output to approximate for a duty cycle to approximate an analog output, but an actual DAC, where you set the output and then you get a consistent voltage coming out of it. So this chip seems like pretty much the ideal interface chip as a general purpose, throw it in and it'll do 90% of the use case sort of situation chip. The thing is, drivers for it. I need a Python driver so I can integrate it with the test runner software. So, oh, hang on. All right, so there are reports of ads. I am going to, let's see, I'm going to see if I can turn off monetization. I don't know if it's possible to do this. Hang on, no, it doesn't have paid promotion, automatic chapters. I'm going to see if I can turn off monetization now, like while the stream is live. I don't even know if it's possible. Monetization, here we go. It's currently on. I'm going to set it to off and save. I don't know if it's going to make any difference to the actual stream now while it is live, but we shall see what happens. Gavin said, yeah, no, leave on. No, no. If it's annoying people, then I do not want it to be on. So yeah, my hope was just that it would mean that there would be notifications for the stream, because of course YouTube is going to prioritize monetized content, and it's more likely to show up.
Off just mid-roll ads, would that make a difference?
That's a good point, maybe. But anyway, I have just turned off monetization entirely for the stream. Hopefully that means that no more ads will pop up, and then maybe what I'll do is turn monetization on afterwards, so that it's only on, so that it doesn't slow down people watching the stream and trying to interact with it. Because yeah, Tabray said, how long are they, and do you get out of sync, or do you just drop into wherever the live stream is? That's the thing. If you end up out of sync, then how is live interaction supposed to work? How do you chat to people when they might be a couple of minutes behind because they watched a couple of minutes of videos, of ads rather? Stephen said, where's Pete? He would have made a joke about selling John's face for ads by now. Yeah, probably. No, his joke would have been that my face isn't good enough to sell ads or something like that. Michael said it seemed to pause the stream to me. Yeah, that sucks. That means that it ends up out of sync. Some Call It Fun says, what are your thoughts on form follows function as it relates to PCB design? Ooh, hang on. That's not what I was trying to do. I was trying to just bring that over there. And there will do. Simon, John's face is an ad. A cautionary tale. Okay, so it paused for as long as it took you to click skip ad. Mlock789 said, I feel your pain, John. I have a face for radio. I'm sure that's not the case. Yeah, so this I/O chip seems like in most cases. All right, so this is. I'll start by stating the problem. What I want to be able to do. In fact, I'll go back to Testomatic here, and I will open that in another tab. What I want to be able to do is have flexibility so that for most situations, most use cases, what you would do is just leave these general purpose modules in here. So these are modules that can do 12-bit ADC, for example, which most of the time that's enough. But there will be situations where you might want to set up a test system with specialized I/O. Maybe you want to put in a module that has maybe high-speed ADC or higher resolution ADC, like you might want to put a 16-bit ADC or something in here, or maybe you want a module that drives a pin for some other special purpose. Who knows? So what I'm trying to do is make it so that this test system is a flexible chassis that allows you to customize it to suit whatever it is that you're wanting to do. And oh, my coughing is bad today. Possibly related to anxiety. That is one of the that is one of my poker tells. If anybody plays poker with me, not that I've never played poker in my life, as far as I can recall. I've played cards a couple of times in my life, but only anyway. Okay, let's not chase that squirrel. All right, so what these modules are doing is mediating between the Raspberry Pi, which is what is being the test runner, and the test points on the target PCB, so on the device under test. So the pins that go onto the device under test connect through these modules, and that is how the Raspberry Pi communicates with them. So the very first version of the Testomatic had I/O pins. I was using MCP 23017s, and I had those directly on the main PCB. And then, actually no, I didn't. I had a Raspberry Pi Pico on the main PCB. So, but then I did a version that did I ever produce it? I can't remember. I don't think I did. I had a version where I had I/O chips directly on the PCB. I might have just done it as a design and then bypassed it. I seriously can't remember. But then I realized that for flexibility and future, I did. Okay, thanks, Jordan. It probably exists in a box here somewhere. So the idea is that it should be possible to just pull one of these modules out and put in a different module, and now the Raspberry Pi can communicate with the device under test in a different way. Maybe it needs, yeah, as I said, maybe like a high-speed ADC, or maybe a higher resolution ADC, or a different type of DAC, or something. I don't know, whatever it happens to be. So what this module footprint does is expose the pins on one side, the pins that go to the device under test, and the other side, the Raspberry Pi. And that really is the crux of the whole thing that I'm trying to figure out right now. So I've got this module, which I designed as the general purpose one that will be used in a typical use case, but I want it to be replaceable by other things. Now, there is, let's go to, how do I get there? Here. I'm going to bring this in so that it doesn't leave a whole lot of space, does it? Once I get the chat over the top. So if I have a look in Testomatic, and a little bit later I might show you what I've done on the conveyor. Since last week I've done some on the conveyor. So we've got the IOMOD design. I'm going to open that, and I will also open, no, actually before I do this I'm going to open IOMOD SW. So IOMOD SW is based on IOMOD SW. Oh, there's even a render of it. Okay, even though it's not routed, but it kind of exists. So what I'm looking towards doing is having available a number of modules that plug into this same footprint. And this particular module, instead of using the AD5593R, has a CH32V003 on it, which is the tiny little micro. It became famous, I don't know, like 2 years ago as, what was it, the 10-cent micro, whatever it was called. Anyway, there is the Kickstarter run by Broadwell Consulting, Jonathan Broadwell, for the serial Wombat IO chip, which is one of the CH32 microcontrollers running some firmware that allows it to do all sorts of fancy IO tricks. So what I was thinking of doing was making a version of the IO module based on this processor. And if I come over here, here it is. It's basically just the processor running some custom firmware. It's got an I2C connection and it's got IO pins mapped out to the module. So what this allows you to do is, for example, the serial Wombat firmware, what you can do is configure outputs to do different things, and then the serial Wombat just takes care of it. Say you want to drive a signal for a servo, and you want to do, what's the frequency of a servo? I can't remember. Anyway, it's like, it's between, I think, 1800 microseconds and 2200 microsecond pulse width. So if you want to set a servo to a particular position, you drive with a certain duty cycle and frequency. And what you can do is, over I2C, you tell the serial Wombat chip that you want output 0, or output 1, for example. Where is it? IO, yeah, say IO 0. Say we want IO 0 to be a servo driver, and we want it to go to an angle of 117 degrees. Then you send that configuration to the serial Wombat, and it just does it. It takes care of all of the timing. It sets up the waveform, etc., to drive the servo. So, oh, Jordan said, might be useful to put the MCU on the bottom so you can leave the top for more silk screen. That's an interesting idea. Just flip the whole thing. Load the board. Essentially what I would do is load the board and then mount it on the headers the other way around. I kind of like that. That is, oh, all right. Jordan, thank you for the idea. So yeah, then all the modules would kind of look flat. It'd just be flat PCB with no parts on it once it's plugged in. Very cool. Okay, so this module is a possible alternative if you have specialized requirements, and in place of just the regular IO mod. And there might be another, Michael says no subsequent ads so far. Cool, so turning off monetization might have fixed that. Excellent. So what I don't want to do is settle on a format for this module that then prevents me from, as Michael says, that then prevents me from using different types of modules in the future. So Tabray says upside down modules might create height constraints. Well, it could potentially, but the thing is that in this application, what we're doing is putting these modules onto these headers, and there is space below it. There, you can see, if I zoom in here, you can see that there, what is that? Sort of, I don't know what that is. Could be a voltage regulator. I can't remember. Anyway, whatever it is. Oh, it might be a transient voltage suppressor or something like a, yeah. Anyway, I don't know. So you can see that there are a couple of parts underneath this, but there is a lot of vertical space there. Don't, David says, we're in Australia. Don't we have to put the modules on upside down anyway in case you want to ship these things to the Northern Hemisphere? That's true. But you can see that the height of the parts on the module, it's not very much compared to the space below it. It would fit within the height of the plastic of the pin header, let alone the other header that the pin header then goes into. So I like that idea. I think, so for me, this live stream has been worth it just for that one idea. I think what I'm going to do is redesign these with the parts on the other side, which essentially just means flipping it, because what I would still do is populate it. Essentially what I would do is design it upside down. I would design it still with the parts on the top, but then have the pins installed sticking up and mirror the pinout so that when you put it in, it is all correct. Yeah. Wagon Load said, will any of the mods need a heatsink? Not likely, but it is possible. And the thing is that if I design a module with the parts on the other side for silkscreen prettiness, that's not prescriptive. You can design a module with parts on the top, parts on the bottom, double-sided, a heatsink on the top. It makes no difference. You just have to design it so that it fits into the same footprint. And there is plenty of room above this, so if you had a mini heatsink or something on it, you could put that on the top. So, yeah, that is a cool idea. So now, okay, these modules, so this one, which uses the AD5593R, and the one based on the Serial Wombat project, both use I2C. And this is the crux of the thing today, which is, am I painting myself into a corner with the pinout that I have assigned here? And this is the pinout as it currently stands. So a brief summary of the logic behind this. The idea is, I want these modules to have 8 I/O pins. Now there may be situations where you make a module that has fewer I/O pins than that, but if that's the case, that's fine. Maybe you have a test situation where you want a 24-bit ADC and it's only got 1 input or 4 inputs, in which case you could make a module that just doesn't even connect the additional I/O pins. It just connects the ones you care about. So you can make custom I/O modules. That's no problem. You just have to be aware of the limitations as you are designing those modules. So the GPIO, Mr. Fixit said, if you had a special use case later, you could make an adapter to plug in between your standard pinout base. Yeah, that's true. I hadn't even thought of that. That is true. So the general plan here is provision for 8 I/O pins, and you can see they are going from 0 to 7, from bottom to top like that. And then on the other side, obviously we need a ground reference, and we have 2 voltage pins. And in many cases these can be tied together. They will just be the same, but they don't have to be. This was a little bit of forward thinking. I/O voltage tells the module what voltage its host system is at. So that's the test-o-matic. And the test-o-matic is using a Raspberry Pi running at 3.3 volts. So in the case of a test-o-matic, there will be 3.3 volts on IO voltage. And that tells the module, communicate with the host at 3.3 volts. So in that case, I squared C would be 3.3 volts. David said, does it really matter if you make your add-on adapter boards multi-layer 4, 6, 8, 128, 128 layer PCB? I'd like to see that. No, doesn't matter at all. No problem at all. All I'm trying to do here is finalize the pinout of the module. What you do on the module is entirely up to you. So then the IO voltage is the voltage that the IO pins will be driven to. Logic voltage is the voltage that it will communicate with. Sorry, I was misspeaking there. So IO voltage is this. So what you might have, for example, is a module that is driving the IO at 5 volts, but its logic here is running at 3.3 volts, talking with the host. That is a valid use case. There is an active low reset pin, and that is so that the host can reset the module if necessary. And at the moment I have I squared C assigned here. So Wagonlight says, old school EEPROM programmers used a personality module to reassign pinouts of different EEPROMs. Yes. Oh, and Jordan said, would an analog ground pin be useful? Maybe. Maybe, but I think that would typically be done on the module itself, not necessarily something that's the responsibility of the host. Yeah, if you had a separate ground for the analog power zone, you'd still need to couple them through an inductor or something. Yeah, my feeling is not necessary, and it could be done for situations where you need that. That could be done in the context of the module. Now you'll notice there are 2 pins here that are unlabeled, and that is because they are currently unused. Oh yeah, and that's the adapter, so that the 2mm pitch can be adapted to go into a breadboard. Jordan said, for your AD measurements, yes. Yeah. I see what you mean. On the other side. At the moment, that is actually a bigger question, because at the moment there is no... yeah, and Tabray said, analog ground would be good if it were possible to put galvanically isolated it on the boards. At the moment, there is no provision for that through the through the test module. Wagonlight says, make an adapter that can opto-isolate the mod when needed. Yeah. Okay, so, all right, let's step out and look at the slightly bigger picture, because I think that'll help alleviate some of the questions that are coming up right now. Now, the whole point of building the chassis here and having these modules is that this gives you the ability to make a minimal test board, like a breakout, where is it, the test module here, a minimal test module that takes advantage of the I/O pins that come from those modules. But you don't have to use them, because what comes up here is serial. There are multiple serial ports. There's I squared C, there's SPI, there's other stuff that is brought up onto this. So if you had a situation where you were wanting to build a test module with a fully galvanically isolated ADC or something, you could just put it straight on the test board. It doesn't have to be done in the module. And then you could talk to it directly from the Raspberry Pi. So you are not forced to use these test modules for all of your testing. If there is something that is specialist and you have some weird and wacky requirement where you need very high speed sampling or whatever, you can build that into the test module. as part of the test pin carrier board. You can put whatever you like on that. The only reason for having these modules here is to cover the the typical 90% use cases where you just want to drive some digital I/O, read some voltages between 0 and 3.3 volts or 0 and 5 volts or whatever, generate a reference voltage. So this is not preventing you from doing fully opto-isolated testing or galvanic isolation and all of those sorts of things. You can do that on your test pin carrier board. Yep. Jordan said, just trying to make good use of the extra pins if there's low-hanging fruit. Yep. No, I'm not discounting the suggestion, and these are all excellent things to be thinking about. And it does help me to reframe what is the problem I'm actually trying to solve. And I have to keep telling myself that I'm not trying to solve every single problem, because I kind of forget that the whole point of this modular system is that you can implement any test protocol or interface or circuitry you like on the test pin carrier. So you don't have to run all your tests through this. You could build a system here and not populate any of these modules. Just leave them all empty and do all of your specialist testing on the test pin carrier, because the Pi has SPI and serial and I2C, etc. connecting to it. So Gerald said, could you make a flying ground for if or when it's needed? You could. I think that is best handled on the test pin carrier though. So coming back to here, what I want to do, Jordan said, could even make a space for extra modules on the tester board for such things. Yes, you could. Yeah, exactly. And that's actually why I've done things like, where is it? If we scroll down here, this and this. So if your design has an ESP32 on it and you want to be able to flash it, you can put this module on your test pin carrier and then you can flash it from the Raspberry Pi, because this connects to one of the spare USB ports. If you want to talk via CAN bus to your device under test, you put this module on your test pin carrier board, and now you've got CAN bus connected via SPI. So yeah, and then it is very likely that there will be other specialist test modules that either myself or other people make over time as the need comes up. For now, this module is just about the general purpose I/O pins and making those flexible. So, okay, these two spare pins that are here. So I could have made this so this is currently a 14-pin dip. I could have made it a 12-pin dip by dropping these two pins. But when I was doing this, I had in mind that what I wanted to do was also support SPI in the future. Now, my thought process at the time, I now no longer agree with. I think I was wrong with this thought process, but I'll explain it, and then I'll explain why I was wrong. Yeah, Mr. Fixit says, try not to get stuck due to overthink. Exactly. That is the whole decision paralysis thing. So that's why I need to just make something that solves most of the problem. I don't have to make it perfect. Okay, so what we have on here at the moment is SDA and SCL and reset. So what we can do is we can talk to different modules. But how do we starting again. How how do we use this same footprint if, for example, we wanted to put in a module that was using SPI. Now for SPI, it doesn't just use 2 pins. It's not just a clock and a bidirectional data pin. You need data, it's 2 data connections. So we've got data going to the device, data coming from the device. So essentially it's like TX and RX. It's just that it uses different terminology. But you can think of it as TX and RX and a clock and a chip select. So you need 4 lines for SPI. And so what I was thinking of doing, Michael, you got me there. Also, don't overthink about overthinking, because that would be meta overthinking. Is it possible I'm overthinking? You probably are, Michael. Stop overthinking. Stephen W. said, one that might be useful is an INA 260 voltage current sensor module for the test PCB. Oh yeah, that's true. Yeah. I do already have INA 260s on the main board, so I can measure the current used by the device under test on the 3.3 volt and 5 volt rails and the main power rail. But putting an INA 260 on a specific load on, yeah, okay. Stephen, that is an interesting, oh, Jordan pointed out that I can't count. Currently 16 could drop to 14. Yeah, I said 14 could drop to 12 because I looked at this and went, oh, there are 7 pins on this side. But no, it's 8 pins. It's 0 indexed. There are 8 on that side, 8 on that side gives us a total of 16. 8 plus 8 equals 16. I don't count so good. I can count about as well as an LLM. Okay, so so what I had in mind was, if you wanted to do a version of a module and put SPI on it, what I would do is the I2C clock line would just become the SPI clock line. The I2C data line would become, say, the MISO line, or MOSI, it doesn't matter. So that would become one of the data lines. Then one of these would become the other data line, and one would become the chip select. So that would account for those 4 pins. And that means that we could make an SPI module on this same footprint. However, David says, only got 10 fingers. How the heck are you meant to count above 10? Just in binary. In binary. Okay. How do we do this? 1. Sorry, I'm looking at a mirror. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. You get the idea. You can count to 10-bit binary, which I think is 1023 if you 0 index it. Tessie Bob says Uncle Pete must either be at work or in bed. Maybe. One of those. Maybe he's sleeping on the job. Jordan says, but you would need a separate slot for those. Okay, so this is where I think Jordan is looking ahead to where my cunning plan totally falls over. Because if you put an SPI module into one of these slots and you are talking SPI to it, then still got the binary count wrong. 3 fingers was 8. I think your 6 was 7 and your 7 was 8. Yeah, whatever. You know, what I was actually thinking about was, it's remarkably hard to, I was thinking about the fingers. My fingers don't bend that well. So I was thinking about trying to, hang on, so it's 1. That is hard, getting that finger up. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, let's not break my brain. You did preface it by saying he was bad at counting. I am bad at counting. So, all right. Oh, and my other excuse is that I'm looking at it backwards, because on the camera it's reversed. So when I do this, hang on, if you're looking at it that way, that is actually my left hand little finger. So that would be naturally, if you've got the least significant bit on this end, that would be 1. And then that would be 2. But then it's backwards on camera, so I was trying to do it backwards. Anyway, that's my excuse. Mr. Fixit says the only finger that goes up easily is the middle one. And Paul said, big Indian fingers or little
Outside
Indian.
the box said, isn't that the difference between counting and accounting?
Yeah, counting and accounting. Yeah, okay, so I think, was it Jordan? Someone pointed it out. Yeah, Jordan, I think, was getting to the crux of this, is that if I have a test-o-matic here, and it has a number of modules, and I have a couple of modules here that are on I2C, and I want to plug in some specialist modules that have SPI, all of a sudden we're having a really, really bad day, because we can't actually talk SPI and I2C on the same lines. Yeah, now, so this also relates to, okay, so one thing that you might be wondering here is, where is the address pins? Where are the address pins? How am I putting 8 modules? Is it 8? I can't count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. How am I putting, we've already established I can't count. How am I putting 7 I2C modules on here and they do not have address pins exposed on the modules? Well, the answer, for those of you who might remember, is this little magic chip up here in the top left corner, which is an I2C multiplexer. So each of these modules has I2C pins that connect to this multiplexer, and then the Raspberry Pi can determine which module it wants to talk to at any one moment. So as far as each of these modules is concerned, they are sitting on a dedicated I2C bus. So, but in any case, that does not solve the problem of, what if I want to put on an SPI module and still have some I2C devices on here? Because what I would have to do is connect the SPI bus from the Raspberry Pi onto the external side of the I2C multiplexer nets, and that would suck. That whole thing just would not work. Okay, Tech Nebulous said, when I did mine, I added jumpers for SPI or I2C. Oh, Tech, please share. Paul said, if the board under test has SPI, can this be tested? And as Simon pointed out, just add more pins. And here we are. 50 minutes in, we've got to the point of this, which is adding more pins. And what pins should I add? Which is not as obvious as you might think. The obvious thing here is, if I want to add a couple of pins to this, what should they be? So if I add 2 pins, what I can add is MOSI, MISO, clock, and chip select. And I think that is enough. I think that's what I need to do, but I don't know whether I am painting myself into a different kind of corner by doing that. So Simon said the CS will be fun so that you could have SPI devices in each slot. Yes, exactly. So can you do SPI with an optional JST connector? I don't know what you mean by that. What do you mean by an optional JST connector? Oh, maybe you mean have a JST connector on the carrier board that then plugs into the module. Yeah, it kind of gets I think part of the point of this though is to make this neat. So what I'm going to do, this is my proposal. I am going to take the existing design for the IOMOD and I am going to make a modified version. Let's do this, new folder. IOMOD, I can talk about this all day. I'm going to call it 2.0 because it's a breaking non-compatible thingy. No, not IOMOD 1.0. 2.0. And the easiest way to talk about this is going to be to actually just kind of do it so that we've got something to look at while talking about it. So I'm going to bring over the existing IOMOD 1 stuff and then I'm just going to hack around with the schematic a bit and we will see how it all falls apart or together. Hopefully it'll fall together. Hopefully it won't fall apart, but it may well fall apart. It could be compatible if you just add the new pins at one end, said Simon. That's true, but I don't know about that. I want to keep stuff grouped together. I'd like to keep the SPI stuff grouped together. And I would end up with, okay, say, let's go back to the, let's go back to here. Say I added pins at the bottom. So that would mean that the extra SPI pins are at the bottom here. There would be a ground in between that and the other things. If I added it at the top, it would be separated from these two pins. I think the logical thing to do is to take the ground pin, like extend it at the bottom, move the ground pin down here to the bottom right, and then have 4 pins in a row on the left here, which can be the SPI pins. And so, yeah. There isn't, because there's no install base at the moment for these modules, there's no real tech debt to worry about in that sense. So I would rather do it, get it right, rather than half-ass this. I want to do this properly. So what have I got here? So I've got a 1x8 2mm header, and let's see, do I have, I don't know if I've done a 2mm header. I might end up having to mess around with my library here just to have a header. M07, so where are we? 8, the 8-pin 2mm pitch with pins below is there. So what I'm going to do, oh, M09, I don't have M08. I'm going to have to go to, that is kind of weird, isn't it? I'm going to have to go to an 18-pin dip, which is a strange thing. Like, typically you have, like, dip 8, 14, 16, 20, 24. Dip 18 is not that common. Okay, I am going to have to make, all right, this sucks. I'm going to have to edit this. So, where are we? Hub library, Superhouse, connectors. Let's edit that one. Okay. I've got to make myself a 9-pin connector. Go to 20, said Jordan. You could go to 20 and keep your spares, said Simon. Oh, Stephen W says on the plus side, 10/8 prevents inserting it the wrong way around it. Oh, do you need SPI in a module, or can you just pass it straight to the PCI connector? Oh, it's already passed straight to the PCI connector, any mills. So SPI is already available. If you wanted to put an SPI-based test device on the test pin carrier board, yeah, you can do that. There is a lot of I/O available there. Okay, I'm going to move this down here. I'm going to move the chat off screen. Quad pack. Because I need to, I'm going to have to, oh, look at that, that's horrible. Swap, I don't even know what that thing is. Where are we? M09. Oh, it's the old style symbol as well. So you can see here, all right, this is going to be a slight tangent rant thing. Look at this. It's a little bit hard to see, but down here on the left, you can see this symbol for an M10 header and the symbol for the M8 header are the same style. The M9 is, oh, what is this going to do in terms of the, oh, the more I think about this, the more annoying it is. I have a bunch of the 2mm 1x8 sockets, and I'm going to need to get 1x9 sockets. Let's see if I have 2x2 high win. Okay, so, oh no, that's not it. I thought I had the right one. That's not IDC header, 2mm IODC socket. That's all IDC. Sorry, I'm just looking at a spreadsheet right now, trying to find where I got those 2mm sockets from. It would have been from LCSC, but normally I keep a record of these things in a spreadsheet so I can buy more of them in future. Okay. I'm going to defer this. What I could end up doing, or maybe I could delegate it to one of you. This is like having assistants working with me. There was a, oh, Tabray said 5x5 quad pack is what I meant to say. Yeah. And Simon said, I think non-symmetrical would mess with John's brain. Yeah, it would. So, okay, back to here. All right, I'm going to ignore that other thing. So, I bought 1x8 2mm pitch sockets, I think from LCSC. I'm pretty sure that's where I got them. I'm going to need to get either 1x9 sockets or longer ones if 1x9 isn't available, and I suspect they're not. Maybe 1x10s, and then trim them. But I don't know. Yeah, so if anybody finds 2mm pitch sockets on LCSC, please let me know. I could probably find them again. Somewhere around, I've got the bag of them, so I could just look up the LCSC part number for the 1x8s and then figure out where the other sizes are from there. Okay, I am going to ignore that problem and come back to the header. So what I've got is, at some point in the past, I started switching to a different style of symbol, and you can see here the M09 connector has this style of symbol, and the 10 and the 8, etc. Maybe some of the others, the 7, the 6, they're all this newer style. And the 9, because it's such a weird thing, I very rarely use 9-way pin headers. I mean, what would you use a 9-way pin header for? Yeah, Stephen W said 9 pins is probably going to be fairly uncommon. So maybe I should, yeah, maybe I should go for the 10s and have some spare pins again. Oh, that is tempting. So I have 1.27mm castellated. What else have I got? So what I'm going to need to do is, all right, let's let's make a, where is it, M08. I've got this 1x8 2mm pins with pins below. So what I can do is M5 stamp S3s use a 9-pin header and a 6-pin header. Oh, and David C said, ooh, Simon said, found the 1x9 2mm on LCSE. Nice. Can you please drop the C number in here for me? Oh, nice. See, okay. Now the this is exciting. That and that and that. You better not be rickrolling me. Oh, that's the pin header. Okay, so this is the pin headers, but what I mean is the socket that goes with this. That's what we need to find. I've got 2mm pitch pin headers in strips of 40, so I just cut them to whatever length. Just the C number is 917596. Yep, okay, cool. Now what we need is the matching socket. The socket is the tricky bit. But that was a good find. I should just order these like this in this length so I don't have to cut them. Socket to him. Yeah, cool. Thanks, Simon. I'm going to leave that open and I've just minimized that window so I can find it again later. Now if I go for 10 pin, okay, do we want, I don't necessarily want to make this larger and just have spare pins for the sake of spare pins. I want to get it right. So, ooh, Simon found the matching one. Thank you, Simon. I'm going to bring back up that other window. Where is it? Here. Okay, so I'm going to bring that up. Here we have the part number. Oh, that's a machined pin socket. That's not what I was expecting. That's the super fancy one. Maybe I should go for that. The one that I was using previously was just like a regular, you know, like the standard 0.1 inch pitch header, which has just got a straight side on it, and but it was in the 2mm pitch. Yeah, as Gerald said, the female header is not fun to cut. No, trying to get the end nice and smooth. What I often end up doing is clipping through one of the connectors, like through one of the pins with side cutters, and then I trim the end with a scalpel to make it nice and smooth. Stephen says that's more for round pins. Yeah. Yeah, cool. So we have a couple of options there. Very nice. Now, if I go for 10 pin, what does that mean? I would have some spares. I'm just thinking hypothetically, what would those spares be used for? Oh, Simon said, do you want SMD or through hole? I think through hole in this case, because it uses a little bit less space on the board. Yeah, I think through hole. And so where are we? 2 pin. What was I doing? That's right. What I was doing was I was going to make a duplicate of this, and I might as well just do this anyway. I'll do it. 1x8. Let's make a 1x10. 1x10, 2 pins below. Okay. So what's my grid pitch here? Let's set it into proper units and do, let's just grab this and go copy group, Okay, so we've got pins 9 and 10, and then I want to recenter everything. Where's the 0 point? Right there. Okay, so I'll put that between pins 5 and 6. And we're done. Okay, so I'm just going to save that as a new footprint. And where are we? Manage, push the updated library to the cloud. Where are we? And then Simon said, through hole is also stronger. And Stephen W said, SMD would add horizontal width. Yeah, exactly. Oh, Simon said, oh, awesome. Simon, what I need, Jordan said name and value should be centered. Yeah, true. I need you sitting with me anytime that I am working on projects, so I can just say, find me these parts. Come on, I thought I hit enter. Did I hit enter? Maybe I didn't. That's it. That is it. So that is the 9-way. Yes. Now, okay, this is time for brainstorming for extra ideas, because right now I am going to be making this decision about what is the pin assignment going to be for this. In fact, let's do it this way. New, hang on. Let's do this. Most problems can be solved with a spreadsheet. Before doing the actual things, oh, come on. I'm not sitting square onto my keyboard and it's all over the place. IOMOD pinout. Here we go. No, I don't want a table. Let's do this. I'm going to go to, let's just start down here somewhere. So we'll do 1, 2, hopefully this will all start to make sense in a minute. Down to 8 and 8, 8, 8. Okay, I will start with the current version. So we've got 1 to 8. Let's center that up, make it a bit narrower. In fact, no, before I do that, I'm going to go 9, 10, and take this up to here, and center that one, and I want to, I'm going to resize these columns, make it something like this. Okay, view, bring it up to comfortable size. And then we have IO voltage, logic voltage, reset I2C SDA. So this will just give us a quick way to be able to play around with ideas without being, without being too prescriptive about it. So we've got GPIO 0, GPIO 1. And then I'll take these up here.
Tabrez Malik said, is LCSC a new distributor? Not come across it before. Normally use Mouser or DigiKey.
Tabrez, if you haven't come across LCSC, prepare for a happy day. LCSC is like the Chinese version of DigiKey. That's probably the simplest way of thinking about it. It is huge. I actually, in terms of like revenue and all of that sort of thing, I don't know how it compares to DigiKey. My suspicion is that LCSC is bigger than DigiKey by a very big margin, but I could be wrong about that. LCSC is like, yeah, imagine you took DigiKey, put it into China, gave it access to the entire Chinese parts market, and turned the volume knob up to 11. That's basically it. Now there are different characteristics. For example, DigiKey ship super fast, and they ship out of the US. So if you're in the US, you don't have tariff issues, except that DigiKey, of course, have had to pay tariffs on the stuff they bring in. Anyway, I don't want to get into that. I won't get into the whole thing, but basically, LCSC is a Chinese version of DigiKey. If you think of it like that, and you just accept the fact that shipping is going to take a whole lot longer, then it's, yeah. But stuff is cheap, super cheap. Not always, not always. There are some parts that I can buy cheaper from DigiKey than I can buy from LCSC. That tends to be the sort of mid-value things. There are like some parts, like some ICs that are in the sort of $5 to $20 range, are sometimes cheaper on DigiKey than LCSC. But a lot of the rest of stuff, a lot of other things, like you buy all of my reels of parts, for example, I buy from LCSC because I can buy a reel of resistors for like $2. Get 5,000 resistors for $2. It's kind of crazy. So anyway, this is the current arrangement. So hypothetically, what if we wanted to add let's justify that. Okay, so say we wanted to do a version of this with 9 pins per side, then let's see if I can do it this way. Insert row above, that would be 8, that'd be 9. So I'm thinking of making that ground. So this is basically what I had in mind, and this is with a 8, 9, so that would be 10, 11, 12. So let's take that up to there. It's going to mess up my borders, but oh well, I'm not too fussed about that. Oh, yeah, let's fix it. Stick a border on the top there. That is no longer ground. So this could be, for example, MOSI, MISO, clock, oops, I'm trying to type SCK, and then chip select. It could be something like this. Or actually what I would probably do is get rid of that. Oh no, let's do it this way. Take that, stick it there, and stick chip select up here. Because there may be situations where chip select is used in an I2C context as well, like the equivalent of the X shut pin on the time of flight sensors. So this...
Some call it fun said. Is there a risk of making VCC and GND opposite if plugged in backwards, maybe ground at pin 18?
Yeah, ground up here. Let's think about that for a second. If it was plugged, say ground was up here, and you plugged it in backwards, what that would do is, so GPIO 0 would be down here. 0 would get plugged into the VC, into the IO voltage pin, and it would be exposed directly. Ground would be connected, yeah, maybe. I don't think it's a huge deal, because I think it's going to be super obvious with these which way around they go. But yes, that is worth thinking about. Okay, now let's do a version with an extra couple of pins. And think about, this is a better way of doing it. 7, 8, that'd be, in fact, what I can do is just go that and badoink, goes down to pin 11, that becomes pin 12, 13, whoops, 13, 14, etc. Okay, so I will go 14. The reason I'm adding that is if I drag this up, it's going to change the border. So then I'll do that and that. Hang on, what happened? What went wrong here? 11, 12, 13, 9. I added an extra one. What am I doing? My brain misfired. It's because I was thinking of adding, what I was thinking of doing was adding 2 extra rows compared to the original, but then I'm adding 2 extra rows compared to the, the already modified one. So let's do this. 11. We've already established that I can't count. That is now a well-known fact. So let's move here to here and grab that. Is this going to add intermediate? Oh, I did. You stupid thing. Okay, I'm going to do this. Clear all. Stick a right thing on here. Stick a bottom on here. And top on there. Okay. So maybe, yeah, okay, so SCK and so I could put that up there and that leaves us with a couple of spares. Now, what might we want spares for? A possibility is like an IO ref. Michael says if you want to screw up any kind of data, put it in Excel. Now, okay, going backwards. Okay, I'm just trying to catch up with chat. It looks like it's the Temu of electronic components, says Debraze. Kinda. David C. Narrator, the magic smoke was discovered. Cans of magic smoke were then purchased. If if a module following that diagram is rotated accidentally, then VCC and ground will be swapped. Things like ESD diodes will short the supply on the main board. And Tabray says, I have the same concern as some call it fun. Any room for a mauve mu? Interrupt, says Simon. Yes. Next time, select all pins at the same time and use outside borders. Yeah, I should have just done that. Thanks, Jordan. If VCC was in opposite corners and ground was the next pin to VCC, then plugging it in wrong won't hurt. Okay, so that would mean putting ground, hang on, if VCC was in opposite corners and ground was the next pin to VCC. When you say VCC in opposite corners, do you mean like IO voltage in one corner and logic voltage in the other? Because it does kind of make sense to put the IO voltage pin next to the IO thingy-majiggamies. And the IO voltage comes from the test pin carrier board. This IO voltage pin is not supplied from the test-o-matic. Hang on, I've got a cough. I won't dive into that in great detail right now, but the reason for this is that the logic voltage is set by the Raspberry Pi. This is the voltage that the Raspberry Pi wants to talk to the module with. The I/O voltage is the voltage that the test pin carrier board wants to talk to the module with. So it's looped back around. That pin comes off the I/O module. So it does actually make sense. For example, if I took all of these and just moved them down here, if I took IO voltage and put it here, that actually makes a lot of sense because it represents what is going on with the connection to the test pin carrier. All of these pins are connected to the test pin carrier, everything on the right. Everything on the left is connected to the host. So I do like that, that logical grouping. And if you wanted isolation, we could have two grounds. We could have a ground here and a ground here. So we've got left voltage domain, right voltage domain. But I don't know if a second ground is justified. Okay, so Stephen W says, logic to 1, ground to 2, IO volt to 20. Yes. I'm going to do this just to... just to see what it looks like. I do kind of like having a ground down here though. Where are we at? Okay. And IO volt to 20. Yeah. So we've got ground there. So what would happen is you'd end up with IO, if it was reversed, IO voltage would end up on pin 10, logic voltage would end up on pin 11. Power VCC, move pin 1 to 12. 1 to 12. IO voltage down to here. Okay, I am losing track here. Okay. Now, yes, okay, so possible pins, possible extra pins. Possible extra pins, extra pins. Interrupt from module to host is one. And what else? Oh, okay, what about address pins? Now, I've kind of got around this on the carrier. All right, I don't actually want to do this, but I'm going to put it down here anyway. Module address pins. So what I'm talking about here is, okay, I actually needed to take a drink as well this time. Yeah, so what I'm talking about here is if you wanted to have multiple I2C modules all on the same bus without the multiplexer on the host, then you would need some way of addressing them. And that could either be set on the module itself, you could have address jumpers on the module, or externally and control it from the host board. But the problem is then, how many do you have? One address pin? 2, 3, 4? I don't know. There are devices that need 4 address pins because they've got 16 possible I2C addresses. So I don't want to waste 4 pins with address pins that will probably not be used. And the way I see this is that the chip select pin, which is going to be controlled by the host on a per socket basis, could be used as like an enable or disable pin. So if you wanted to have all of the modules on the same I2C bus, you could bind the chip select pin to an address pin to force all of the modules off the active address and then just page them in as you want them. Oh, okay, so Wagon, some call it fun said RX, TX, JTAG. Okay, let's put things down on here. RX, TX, so yeah, this is the brain dump phase of the thing, where I'm just going to put on things here whether I think they're a good idea or not, and then make a decision. So Wagon Load says, ground pin 1 and 11, VCC 10 and 22. That way you can't hurt it if it was plugged in backwards. That is an interesting way to do it. Yeah, so what you would do is have it diagonally symmetrical. So the worst case is that you would end up with a 5.5 volt voltage being exposed on a 3.3 volt pin or something like that. So, which probably isn't going to kill anything. So it wouldn't, yeah, the module wouldn't work because the I/O pins would be on the data side and vice versa. But you're not going to let the magic smoke out. So that is an interesting pin arrangement. So that would be, say, logic voltage here, then a ground, and then down here you would have I/O voltage, whoops, I/O voltage, no, you'd have a ground down there and you'd have an I/O voltage there, or vice versa. So it could be like a mirror of this with ground there, logic voltage there. So if it got plugged in 180 degrees out, grounds would still be joined correctly, I/O voltage and logic voltage would be swapped. All of these other pins would be swapped as well. Tabraze says that would still power the board, so the I/O is being pushed back to the Pi. That's dangerous. Yeah. Yeah, so this is an interesting train of thought. I like where you're going with that, trying to make it safe. But I'm just going to park that for now. Now, things like JTAG, JTAG is going to be kind of target specific, and I don't want to embody anything too specific in the headers of these modules. And that is the sort of thing that you could do, because remember we have USB ports exposed all the way through to the test pin carrier. So you could put a JTAG like programming adapter or something. Say you wanted an ice burner or whatever it happened to be. You can do that on the test pin carrier board. You don't need to do that through one of these modules. That's more of a specialist sort of thing, like similar to putting an ESP flashing interface on the target board connected via USB. We have the USB hub on the Testomatic board, and that gives us USB ports that we can use for all of those sorts of purposes. So the text wrapping, what other formatting options do I have? Vertical, okay. So I'm not going to put JTAG on this header. Okay. What else? Simon says just don't plug it in wrong. Yep. So RX and TX is interesting, even though we already have RX and TX. We have serial ports exposed up to the test pin carrier board. So, well, actually, no, we don't. What we have is USB, and then I've done the USB to serial board. That ESP flasher board actually provides high-speed serial, so you can do multiple RX and TX if you want to, using that module and not doing it through these I/O modules. Michael says, for the record, there have been no more ads. Nice. Mr. Fixit said, with the mod IC on the bottom, just write this end up on the top edge of the PCB. Yeah, it's going to have, I think it will have very clear labeling. Of course, this doesn't prevent people designing their own carrier boards and mounting the modules backwards, but it doesn't really matter. Yeah, I think all of the thought around making it safe to plug it in backwards is a useful exercise, and it's good to think through what will happen in this scenario, but I don't want that to dictate things unnecessarily. So, okay. Now, the reason that RX and TX is interesting in this context is, what about using a key pin, i.e. a missing pin in the module, says Stephen? Potentially. Yeah, potentially. Okay, let's come back to this, because what we are trying to solve here is the whole what if it's plugged in backwards scenario. I think it's premature to solve that right at this point in the conversation. We need to first decide what pins do we need, and if there are, because we haven't even got to that point yet, like we've either got a couple of spare pins here, or we go for an 18 pin and then we don't have any spare pins. And so I'm still on the fence about, should it be an 18 pin dip or should it be a 20 pin dip with a couple of spares? And what would go on those spares? My feeling is that I can get everything I need on the 18 pin dip. And so what I'm looking for right now is justification for going for 20 pin. Do we want to go for 20 pin? And something like an interrupt from the module to the host is possibly a reason for going for a 20 pin. But I think that is probably not necessarily enough. Okay, so module address pins. I don't want to expose a bunch of extra pins for addressing modules when that can be done either through just using chip select or an external multiplexer or multiple I2C buses from the host or jumpers on the module itself. So there are other solutions to that problem. So I don't want to tie up a bunch of extra pins for no particular purpose. Tech Nebula said, if you change from 9 to 10, then main board have to change also, so keep what you need only. Tabrez said, you have the potential for 3-bit address bus for the 8 positions, including CS's address, no need for I2C expander. No, well, okay, so one of the reasons for the I2C expander and the reason for AD5593R, the thing is, a lot of these devices just don't have that many address pins. Like this. So the AD5593R, this is the general purpose thing that I've been using. It has one address pin, address 0. That's it. It can only exist on a couple of addresses. So like having extra pins on the header does not actually solve anything for using this chip. Where are we? Here we go. So pinout. We've got A0. So we've got SCL, SDA, reset, blah, blah, blah. The IO pins, VLogic and VReference. So the VRef is the voltage of the IO pins. So even if I had extra IO pins extra address pins on the header, that would not solve the problem for this chip. You would still need to multiplex across those I2C buses. So yeah, Tabrez, your point is well taken. I understand what you're saying, but it doesn't solve it in this particular case. Jordan said, do chips read the address pin once or constantly? Which is an excellent question. So so the point that Jordan is making here, and it's something that I've been pondering as well, and I don't know the answer, is can you, for example, wire that A0 pin, the address 0 pin, to the chip select, and then have it so that you pull that pin low for all the modules, which puts them all onto the same I2C address. And then for just one module, like on one slot, you take it high, which puts that one onto a different I2C address. And then you could talk to it. Now, if you do that after the chip has booted, like after it's gone through its power up, will it change I2C address? And I think that is kind of on a case-by-case basis. You can't take it for granted. There might be some devices, like say the AD5593R does dynamically change its I2C address with the state of that pin. There may be a different I/O chip that doesn't. So you can't count on it either way. So Jordan, I've been thinking that problem through, and so the way I think that could be solved is the chip select pin could be implemented on the module in a way that it puts the chip into like an inactive state. It could either assert reset on the chip, or it could have a buffer so it isolates the I2C bus, so like on the data line, and basically just make the module go deaf. You could have a tri-state buffer with an enable, so the enable pin comes from the chip select, and then the device that is on the module is isolated from the I2C bus based on the chip select. Its address doesn't change, it stays on the same address, it just never sees any messages. So I think that is the way to implement this. Then, yeah, so I think it is possible to use the chip select to enable and disable, or to select between different I2C devices, even if they are on the same address. So I don't think we need to expose address, this is the summary, I don't think we need to expose address pins for I2C because we can mask off or disable I2C devices using the chip select line, which is borrowed from SPI. So and I don't think that's a problem either, because each slot would have its own chip select line, and then that can be driven by the host. And in the case of SPI, it's used for SPI communications. In the case of I2C, it would be to mute the I2C device on the bus so it's no longer talking. Okay. Jordan says, if you assert reset, then it will kill any signals it is currently outputting. Yes, that's a good point. That's a good point. So if we wanted to set a reference voltage on a DAC output from the chip, and you set that voltage and then you put it into reset, it's gonna kill that signal. That is a very good point. So I think it would need to be done with something like this as the enable pin on a tri-state buffer connected to the I2C data line. And you can get tri-state buffers in tiny little packages. Like you can certainly get them in like SOT 23-6 or whatever it is. And Simon says, for the I2C, all you would need to do is disable the STL. Yeah, that's true. Disable the clock, or yes, either one. Disable the clock or the data, doesn't matter which one. The device itself could keep seeing its clock, it just won't see any data. And it won't try to assert the data. Simon said, not the data line, just block the clock. Okay, I'm curious. My gut instinct would have been to keep the clock and to put a tri-state buffer on the data so that the chip sees the clock, but it just does, and it doesn't see any interruption to the clock, it just doesn't see any messages. So it's never going to, and if it tries to send anything, which it shouldn't, it'll never get through. So, but if you interrupt the clock, then there will still be data coming through on the data pin from the host as it talks to other devices on the bus, but the device won't see a clock signal, so it won't actually process those messages because the bits in the data are synchronized to the clock transitions. So anyway, my feeling would be that it would be safer to keep the clock running and isolate data, and than to do it the other way around. Tabray says, doesn't I2C have a start condition or start bit? Well, it's got a whole bunch of stuff, but that doesn't matter. If we wanted to mute communications with a particular module and we stop sending data to it, we isolate its data pin, then it doesn't matter. Because what we do is, before we start talking to it, we re-enable that pin and then have some tiny, tiny little delay to allow the buffer to become active again, and then we start talking to it. So I think that's quite manageable. So, okay, so my inclination is either to go for 18 pin with this layout exactly as I have it here, or 20 pin and we have spares, but I don't know what to do with those spares. It is kind of tempting to put a ground pin here, and yes, I know that then becomes a reversing issue and we end up with doubled up grounds. Doubled up grounds, yeah, the double ground doesn't actually matter because we don't have a separate ground on the target. Backwards and forwards I go. All right, so if we had 2 more pins, what would we use them for? Do we want an interrupt module, an interrupt from this module to the host? I don't know. Maybe that is useful. That could be. What I would, yeah, what I'm quite tempted to do is put a ground on this pin and a ground on this pin. So we've got, and yes, I know this makes it potentially dangerous for reversing, but I think, okay, I think that horse has bolted, and if someone plugs in one of these modules backwards, it's going to do bad things. So don't do that. And then we would have an interrupt output coming out on this side. So what we would have is this as the host power domain, this as the device under test power domain. Tabray said interrupt is more useful than CAN TX and CAN RX. Yeah, I definitely wouldn't put CAN on this because communicating, I don't know that there are any CAN modules like IO. Okay, what might we want to put on a module? That is the fundamental question. Oh, I had a sneeze. Hang on. I'm going to turn on the heater. And yes, this is going to be annoyingly noisy. I apologize in advance. But my nose is starting to run. I am getting seriously cold. There it goes. All right. Interrupt alert squirrel output back to Pi. Emil says the question is, what do you need today to make it work for your purposes? Design for that. Can always make a V3 later to include some more stuff. Yes. That is... Oh, and Jordan said VREF. Tabray's asked, what about a CAN module? I already have a CAN module, and that is different to this. What I've got is a CAN module. Not there. I have this. So this module would plug, this would mount on the test pin carrier board. I have some in the box just here. So this is a CAN transceiver. It's a fully isolated CAN transceiver it's the ISO 1042, which is a really nice CAN transceiver. I like these a lot. and it is coupled with an MCP2515 CAN controller on SPI. So what you can do is mount this on your test pin carrier board and have CAN bus connection to the device under test. So the I/O module does not need to solve the problem of CAN connectivity. That is solved elsewhere. What we're talking about here is just I/O pins. So we're talking about digital input, digital output, analog input, analog output, and like PWM and those sorts of functions. So I did think about, okay, so when I say RxTX here, I am talking about, okay, so module address pins. I am going to strike that out because I think the chip select solves that problem. In fact, I'm going to say CS can be used to drive a tri-state buffer on the module to isolate I2C. Okay, so that's just a note for future reference. So module address pins that problem does not need to be solved. JTAG is solved elsewhere. That's solved on the test pin carrier module. RxTX, I'm going to address this now because that, hang on, I'm going to find, so it's Broadwell Consulting, here we go, this thing. So this is now, okay, next point of discussion. I want to do a module based on the serial wombat, and where is some, I'm looking for pretty pictures. Firmware architecture, executive summary, there's lots of documentation here. Communication, okay, here we go, communication protocol. So what the serial wombat is, this is the thing I was talking about earlier, where it is a microcontroller running custom firmware developed by Jonathan Broadwell, which turns it into an I/O, like a general purpose I/O driver board. You can use it for reading, writing, you can do all sorts of stuff with it. Now, this is the thing. You can communicate with one of these over I2C or UART. Now, a little bit further down, pin state machines, past that, public communications protocol. Okay, so what I can do is, in here, I can, I was going to open the thingy majigamy. Will I, won't I? No, I won't. I'm going to come back to here. What I could do is I could make an I/O module based on the serial wombat and communicate with it over I2C. And then problem is solved in terms of the pinout. We have I2C already on our header. So that's not a problem. And that is quite legitimate. I could do that. However, it also supports a UART interface. Now, what this means is, if I put a serial wombat based I/O module onto here, I can have the option, I think I'm just answering my question in my own brain, but I'm going to continue with this thought process and see if people agree with me. I could communicate from the Raspberry Pi to the serial wombat using the UART interface. And that's 115,200 bits a second, sends messages, blah, blah, blah. It's all documented here, and you can do both binary and ASCII communication. So what you could do is you can just use a serial console and you can type your messages for debugging purposes and send it to the serial wombat, and it will do what you want. So seeing this is what got me thinking about maybe I need to add UART as a way of communicating with the test module. Now, keep in mind, this is a really, really critical point. What we are not talking about here is how the test-o-matic or the test system communicates with the device under test. We might need to communicate with the device under test via USB or serial or I2C or SPI or CAN bus or RS485 or infrared or something, or NFC or Wi-Fi. There could be all these different ways that our test system needs to communicate with the device under test. That is not the problem that I'm trying to solve here. The problem that I'm trying to solve is the test system, the test platform, using these I/O modules to control the I/O modules. So that is as far as this communication goes. This communication does not pass through to the device under test. It is how the Raspberry Pi communicates with these test modules. And the more I think this through, the more I think I don't care about UART, because this is a case where what I'm trying to find solutions where the problem doesn't exist. If I put a serial Wombat based I/O module on here, I can communicate with it via I2C. I don't need UART. So the only reason for doing this would be if UART communication had some advantage, like higher speed or something, or if there is a particular test module that only communicates via UART and doesn't communicate in other ways, like I2C or SPI. But if that's the case, you just put it directly on the test pin carrier board. You don't need to make a module out of it. So I am now talking myself into, in fact, I think I've pretty definitively just talked myself into ignoring the requirement. I'm going to minimize that so I can get back to this. Ignoring the requirement for TX and RX. I am going to strike that out and say, no, we are not going to need UART communication with an I/O module. If you have a special use case where you have some kind of a test driver or device or interface that needs UART communication, all you do is put it on the test pin carrier board. It doesn't need to fit into this little socket. Okay. Okay, so Jordan said, possible other modules. I know you already have some of those already handled. CAN module, ESP programmer module, specific voltage power supply, stepper driver, high speed DAC/ADC. Yeah, and then Jordan subsequently said, ignore my previous message. No, your point is very valid. No, these are definitely, oh, Paul said, I would like Modbus, A, B, VCC, ground. So the Wagon Load said, if an I2C had all SDA connected together and an SEL separate, would you be able to talk to each separately? If you drove each clock separately, then yeah, you could do that. You could isolate clocks, so you could effectively make one of the devices go deaf by just not sending them a clock signal. That's true. Okay, so but I already have the multiplexer to take care of that. No, Jordan, your point about the things that you might want to test are exactly correct. There are all of those things and more. But what I'm trying to solve here is communicating with these GPIO modules. Okay, now, interrupt from module to host. Okay, I think that what I'm starting to lean towards here is, all right, I'm just going to do this and move that to there? Or do I need to do it there? Yeah, let's put that there and do that there. Int out, reset I. So yeah, I'm just adding the O and the I is just a little, it's kind of like Hungarian notation. It's saying which direction the signal goes on those particular things. So IO voltage, logic voltage. So maybe IO voltage should be called VREF or something similar to what's on the AD thingy. Oh, Wagon Load says, does your IOMOD have the same pinout as the Wombat so they can be swapped? No. I will show you.
Some Call It Fun said, will you need an interrupt demultiplexer on the main board?
Yeah, that's a good point. Okay, I will get back to that because I had thought through that. If I do this, it's going to tie up a whole bunch of extra I/O on the main board, but we will get back to that. So, where's the, does he have a link here to, oh, that's on YouTube. What I'm looking for is a link to the, oh, maybe here. Yeah, the particular use case for these modules is not quite the same as mine. So one option would be that I could have just picked one of his modules and said that is my footprint and make everything work with that. Let's find one, use the new product selector. Okay, ooh, product selector, dismiss. Finding the right serial Wombat board for you. Okay, pick one now. What I'd like is just a list of them. What is your logic supply voltage? 3.3 volts or less. Yes. Are you looking for an I/O expander or a subsystem board? I/O expander. How many I/O? 5. Let's say 5 to 8. Yes, I can solder. All right, this one. So this is an example. What I could have done is just said, okay, this footprint of this module is what I'm going to use, and duplicate that. So, and then do a version of that with the 805593R or whatever it is on it. But that then does not give me SPI as an option. I think it also doesn't give a different I/O voltage. So hang on, is there a, okay, pinout, here we go, cool, this is what I want. So we've got, it's kind of like a pass-through layout. So we've got a pair of ground pins, a pair of power pins, SCL, SDA. The idea with this is that you should be able to plug these into like a chain in like a breadboard, in a breadboard or a series of breadboards, and you can pass through. So the left and right SCL pins are connected together. These SDA pins are connected together. Power is connected together, ground is connected together, and then it's got 8 I/O pins. And then, so what we've got here is a 16-pin format, but it's got a whole lot of doubling up, and it doesn't have SPI, so there's no possibility of doing it that way. Yeah, I could have done it with this, but then I miss out on a couple of things. So if I wanted to take this footprint and do an equivalent module with other chips on it, I would be limited. So that's the reason that I didn't just duplicate it. So what I'm planning to do, I actually already have some of these CH microcontrollers. I bought them ages ago. And Jonathan has released this project as open source. So on GitHub, if we come back to here, and where is it, code? Yeah, so he's released the bootloader and his code and things like that. So this is an open source project, MIT license, all good stuff. serial wombat pin modes. So his bootloader and his firmware are released, and he's also published the designs for the boards somewhere. What is this one? I'm just going to click in around it. Oh yeah, so that's, yeah, check it out. All the sources here. All good stuff. HS Counter C, yeah, copyright Broadwall Consulting. So Jonathan has done this as like a promo for his business, which is cool. It's a good way of doing it. It's a project that other people can use and build on. This is the true open source way. This is the way. And so you can, I backed his Kickstarter. He doesn't actually ship outside of Australia, so you couldn't back the Kickstarter and get a reward, but I backed it as a no reward backing just to make sure that he had the funds to go through with it. I just wanted to encourage him and have this be successful. So I have in fact it's in my, if I come back to Fusion, where am I? Where's Fusion? I minimized it. So if we come back into here, IOMOD, somewhere in here, no, IOMOD SW is the project. So IOMOD SW, this is his design. Here we go. In fact, this is the one we were just looking at. This is the module that we were just looking at on Amazon. He's published the design files for it, so you can open it, modify it, do what you want with it. And you can see here the VDD line, the power just passes through, ground just passes through, SCL, the tracks pass through over the top there. And then what I've done is I've up here, so IOMOD SW, this is an IOMOD design that I began based on the Serial Wombat design. So this is the fundamental design he's done based on the CH32V, but transmogrified into the footprint. And you can see here I haven't actually done all the routing of it, because this is the point. It was when I was starting to do this that I got to the point of thinking, maybe I want to take the serial interface pins off the Serial Wombat and expose them on the header. Maybe there are other things that need serial. Maybe I should include SPI.
Scott said GACK.
Yeah, so GAC. So that is what kicked off this whole thing of me changing my thoughts about this. So yeah, so this is his original schematic for that Serial Wombat module with the CH32V thing in there. So the and that gets us to the spreadsheet, this spreadsheet. Now, do we want an interrupt output coming from the device under test? No, not from the device under test, from the IO module. Because if I put no more thought into it, this is what I am very tempted to do right now. It's go to a DIP20 format, have double grounds, and add the interrupt output, and have explicitly defined SPI pins. Because with the existing one, so this is the module as it is right now. It's the 16-pin DIP. We don't have explicit SPI. I was just thinking of adding the extra SPI stuff in here, but then we have a conflict with I2C. This solves that problem, but it doesn't give us the interrupt output. And I think that could possibly be useful. If you're using SPI, for example, we might want the interrupt coming out of it. You could add your extras at the bottom. You could support that form factor with another row of sockets. Some Call It Fun said, will you need an interrupt demultiplexer on the main board? Okay, so this comes back to the thing from earlier. So if we have an interrupt output coming from the I/O module, we need a way of detecting that on the Testomatic main board, or the Raspberry Pi, or whatever it is that is talking to this, needs to be able to read this. And so I am trying to do two things here. The most important thing is I'm trying to solve my own problem. The less important thing is I'm trying to solve other people's problems. Because if I design this as a module footprint that I'm going to use in my project, other people might want to use these modules in their project. And I don't want to make decisions that will unnecessarily make their life hard. I would prefer to have like a general purpose footprint that solves my problem and solves other people's problems. So if there is a need for an interrupt output that I may not even use, then it's possibly still worth including that. So interrupt output from devices. If we are talking SPI to, say we're talking SPI to a high-speed ADC, and we are wanting to get it to take a reading, and then we're wanting to do some other stuff, and then wait for an interrupt to tell us that it has a response. And then we start paying attention to the response. I don't know. I don't really have a good feeling for how critical it is to have an interrupt output from the I/O module. But as it stands, this is what I am leaning towards doing, just for covering future things. Scott said, my post in networking is all I'm going to say about showing up for the stream in overtime. Okay. So, Scott, have you been doing some weird stuff? I don't have Discord open right now. Have you been doing some weird stuff with networking, and that's why you are here now? So Wagonload said, a PCF 8574 can pass the int from modules to the controller. Okay, and Simon said, I don't think it is really needed and complicates stuff. That is that's kind of the answer I was hoping for. Because if I don't need, all right, a decision between these two pinouts. If I don't need the interrupt output, I could go for this first one, and this would be simpler. If although I'm logic voltage, I think what I would do is put the ground on this side, move IO voltage over to this side. Okay, let's try this. I am going to, this is just a slight variation on this pinout. So take that, I'm going to say this is IO voltage. I'm going to get rid of that. I'm going to take all of these and move them up here. Then I'm going to make that one ground, get rid of that, and move these in here. Okay, so what this does is give us the power domain for the device under test on the right, including its IO voltage, so that makes it very clear that that's associated with this. It gives us a single ground, and it puts the logic voltage on this side. So this side is the power domain for the host. Okay, so that is one possible format. Post a vote just for kicks. Jordan said, is the 9-pin header more expensive than the 10-pin? I don't know. I would guess not. Simon said, if you really want it, put it on the test board. On the test board, yeah, that's true. If you're doing something that is outside of the scope of all of this. Okay, so on this, I don't like having the doubled up ground pins when it's not actually isolated ground. But I'm not totally against it either. All right, I am slowly leaning towards going for this, the 18-pin version with no interrupt output. Do we need an interrupt output? Crispian says, is it time for bed yet? Maybe. Jordan says, since it's rare. Yeah. I don't think it's going to be excessively expensive. And you could always get a 10-pin header and cut it to 9. Simon says, cheap as chips. Yeah, they are. Yeah. The pin headers on this are not going to be the expensive part. Jack's Tech said, designed for your foreseen use case, not everyone else's. Gerald 42, almost your bedtime. I don't remember what part of the world you're in, Gerald, or what time zone you're in. But if you've got to go to bed, you've got to go to bed. Thank you for coming to my mini TED Talk, or maxi TED Talk. It's been 2 hours and 12 minutes of TED Talk. So, logic voltage, so interrupt out. Can people give me a compelling reason for needing an interrupt coming from the IO pin module to the host? I think not, because typically what we're going to be doing is setting IO pin, driving IO pins with this, and then reading values in. And it's the test. What it comes down to is a driver question. The test runner firmware, which is Python, is relatively slow. It's whether you need an interrupt to deal with a reading coming back from an IO module depends on the driver for the module. And with things, even with things like fairly high-speed SPI devices, you can just block on the read and wait for it to come back. I don't think it actually matters. Jackstack said IO module panic. Yeah, so like an alert, a failure or something. I'm going to put that in here. Let's see, alert from module. I'm going to put it in here just for the record. Move that there. Put a couple of blank lines in here. Okay. Drag that down there. Alert from module. I don't think so. So alert would be if, for example, the module had failed. There was some error condition and you wanted to notify. I'm going to put it on here for the record so that we can re-examine it later. Interrupt from module to host. It kind of falls into that. I think that sort of situation you would discover by communicating with the module over I2C or SPI anyway. If the chip that you've put on the IO module supports some kind of an error condition, you could get that error condition by communicating with it. So I don't think we need a specific alert pin. Jacksec said only reason you would want the interrupt, yeah. And as Simon says, there really isn't going to be anything smart on the modules. So this is what I am converging on, I believe. And I know this is a silly thing, but something that actually kind of tickles me is that we've got GPIO 0 here, and the 0 matches the second digit on the pin number. So IO0 is on pin 10, IO1 is on 11, 2 is on 12, etc. So IO7 is on pin 17. So you can look at the pin number and know, oh, that's IO5. Is there a magic smoke detector? Yeah, Jackstack said, looks like it's burning a pin for nothing. And Simon said, send it. Yeah. I think this is a happy medium. So what I really need to do is document this module footprint abstracted from the context of a specific module. It's important in the context of a module like this, but what I really need to do is define, what I'm doing is defining the socket. I'm not defining the module, I'm defining the socket that the module goes into, and then these modules are complying with that socket standard. So I think, yeah, so what are we doing here? Essentially what we're doing is adding SPI into this blank space here. We are moving IO voltage across to the right and moving all of these down 1. So it's not a dramatic, radical change from the existing thing. Yeah, I kind of like this. I like it. Oh, also, before people start running away, I'll just mention there is not going to be a stream next week because I am going to be on a remote island with no mobile phone coverage, no internet, and I may be underwater. But I'll get back to that in a second. I just wanted to mention that now before other people run away. So what I'm doing is, okay, so that's current, that is proposed, this is a potential. I think what I'm going to do is strike this one out. So Scott said, if you expect the module to possibly have an output related to int, then the pin is worthwhile, otherwise not so much. Green Island, no, it's Heron Island, says Jack's Tech. Non-pin, yeah. So if anyone feels like it, yeah, do a quick Google for Heron Island. Great Barrier Reef, that's where I will be. Tiny little island that you can walk around in not very much time. Yeah, I will talk about that in a minute, but I want to wrap up this. I don't want to get totally derailed talking about me going diving. So the logic voltage IO voltage reset, it slightly irks me that there is no ground pin on the right side here, but we do not have, in some ways that is good because what it shows is that there is no isolated ground on this. It is all relative to the system ground, which is on the left here. So the more I look at this, the more I like it. So we've got voltage and we've got a reset pin and a ground pin that is bracketing it. Then we have I squared C and we have SPI with the chip select pin in the middle between them, because chip select is really like it can be it can be the SPI chip select, or it can be like a mute pin for I squared C if you wanted to use it that way. So what I think I might do is implement this. And I kind of want to do it. Oh, Wagonload says you can use the second ground as a mod plugged in detect. That's true. And Scott says, on the other hand, I think a ground pin on the right side might be useful. I'm slowly being talked into it. I might have to resist this urge. If I did that, I would end up with an extra unused pin on the left side. And we would end up back here. So it is still a debate between these two formats. Now, okay, now a plugged in module detect. That would mean though, connecting an IO pin to that, and it wouldn't be a true ground, it would be a module detection pin. So this is a meta question, which is it necessary to detect the modules that are plugged in? That is something that I actually really did think about, and it would be interesting to be able to just plug modules in and have the test-o-matic detect what modules are in the sockets. Now, for I2C modules, it may be possible to kind of do that using I2C, because if it comes up on, what you can do is scan the address range, but of course you might have the same I/O module that is on a different I/O chips on the same I2C address, so you can't differentiate between them. And I had kind of pondered, how can we have a way of determining what module is plugged in the same way that the Raspberry Pi hats have an EEPROM with an ID in them. So what you do is you scan the EEPROM and you can see what hat you've got plugged in. And I came to the conclusion, so I was thinking about this, not on the stream right now. I haven't talked through this on the stream. I was thinking about it previously. How do we have a way of detecting what module is plugged in? And I can't think of a neat way to do it. So Jack's Tech says just talk to the module. Yeah, so stage one could be you scan the I2C bus, you find what the address is that's visible. If the address is unique to that type of module, then you know what type of module it is. If it's an address that is used by multiple types of module, you then need to probe the module somehow, like communicate with it and see what kind of response you get back to see if it is that particular thing. So module auto discovery is a whole big can of worms, and I'm not sure that I want to solve that problem. Jordan said one wire on that unused pin. Yeah, but then it complicates the modules as well. This is a big can of worms, and I don't know that I want to open it. I think that it might be better to rely on configuring the modules. So this comes down to a question of how often you're going to be plugging and unplugging modules, and I think the answer is not very often. If you set up a test chassis with a particular suite of modules, plugging and unplugging these modules is not a trivial thing. It's not a case of, oh yeah, I'm testing a different type of board, so I'm just going to unplug a bunch of modules, plug different ones in. That sort of thing kind of needs to be handled on the test pin carrier board, things that are really specific to it. Or if you have a test set up for one type of, like a special case where you can't use general purpose I/O modules and you have some specialist modules plugged in, you're probably going to have a different tester with different modules plugged in. So this tester is set up for testing this product, this other tester is set up for testing that product. They've got different modules installed, they have different test pin carrier boards, they are running different test profiles, so you have them set up differently. So I did think through this whole process of, should we auto discover the module type? And I came to the conclusion that that is overcomplicating things, making it really hard for ourselves, and it is not necessarily solving a common everyday problem.
Some Call It Fun said, I thought the original purpose was a cheap board to protect motherboard if test board is something awful.
Yeah, so Some Call It Fun is making a good point, which is coming back to the question of what is the original purpose of this? And the original purpose is replaceable modules to give more capability, so we're not using the Raspberry Pi's I/O directly to talk to the device under test. If one of these modules gets burned, then we want to be able to unplug it, plug a replacement in. That is a major part of this. So I am going to say that I'm going to put down here module auto discovery is out of scope. I'm just going to say that, and I'm going to elaborate on that when I actually document whatever the final footprint is. Okay, I am going to say, yeah, so Jacksec said, just set the program to specify modules, then use the program to test that its modules are responding as expected before trying the GPIOs. That is a very good point. So yes, instead of having it, the thing is that when the test runner is set up, it needs to be configured with how it's going to integrate with the device under test. What is the sequence? It's going to drive pins high, it's going to drive pins low, it's going to read pins, etc. And so that can't be totally automatically configured. It is intrinsically tied to the design of the test pin carrier, to the device under test, to the firmware you're running on the device, etc. And Stephen just pointed out an interesting thing. I like the 2-pin ground. If a single ground gets disconnected, it provides redundancy to ensure I/O voltage and logic voltage don't get passed between rails with a floating ground. Leave the in pin disconnected for now. Future functionality marked reserved. But is this solving a problem that is theoretical, or is it real? If one of the grounds gets disconnected, how would that happen in a situation where, yeah, I think this is solving a problem that is very theoretical. Scott said, code can flash on the screen with the message, yo dummy, wrong modules. Yeah. So, where 2 voltage rails equals 2 grounds, usually you have equals or greater grounds than power rails. Yeah. Yeah. True. But we are not providing voltage to the target device through on this I/O voltage pin. This is coming back from the target device to tell the module what voltage to drive its I/O pins. So yeah, I think having dual grounds is kind of solving a problem that may not exist. I do prefer the idea, I really like the idea that if you look on the right hand side here, this is the complete voltage domain of the device under test, including its ground and its I/O voltage and the I/O pins. And this is the complete voltage domain of the test device, of the tester, including its logic voltage and its ground and all its communications. Conceptually, that is really clean. It is left side, right side, and they are fully defined within those halves. With this, we have the power domain for the device under test on here, but there's no ground. So the ground for it is over here. So it's that plus that. We have the power domain for the test-o-matic fully defined over here. So that kind of niggles in my brain a little bit, but I don't think it justifies going to an extra swap pin 11 to pin 19 and move the I/O pins down to keep your bonus matching numbers. I'm back in decision paralysis. I don't want to overthink this. Okay, so having double grounds does not solve the module detection thing or the module identity thing. And I don't think, and the thing is that these are just going to be tied together. Like on the carrier PCB, ground and ground are the same. On the test module, ground and ground are the same. And we are not talking about high power stuff here. So it's not a case of we need matching ground returns for the current that is going to be flowing through these pins, because we're talking about milliamps here. This is not a high power driving situation where we have to balance return current and have enough capacity for it. These pins are going to have plenty of capacity. And so I don't think having dual grounds actually gains us anything, because we don't have galvanic isolation here on the module. So, and I don't think having an interrupt output is something that I really care about. That falls into the special case situation of if you've got a specialist I/O driver of some kind that gives you an interrupt, then build that into the test pin carrier. Yeah. Jacksec said, unless you're doing logic level shifting, then the grounds are actually isolated. Well, the logic level shifting is being done inside the chip itself. I think I'm going with this. I know Simon said send it earlier, and at that point I was kind of settled on sending it with this, but I do not want to be looking back at this 12 months from now and regretting having a second ground pin or an interrupt output. That is what I would gain by going to a 20 pin instead of an 18 pin. Do I want 20? Do I want 18? Speak up. Speak up. Scott says better switch to 18 pins. I wanted to make a decision on this. In fact, I wanted to partly implement it on the stream today. But the decision is unclear enough. I did promise that there would be decision paralysis on this. So this is where I am going. Yeah, I'll bring it up in a second. I don't know. I don't know. Scott says 18 is almost old enough to drink and vote. Well, in Australia, it is old enough to drink and vote. You can drink and vote at 18. So, can you do a poll on YouTube streams? I don't know. The thing is that I would ignore the poll anyway. Okay, let's see if I can go with 18 and show us the conveyor progress. Keep interrupt as a reserve pin and do your dual grounds. I've got conflicting things here. Can I do a poll? Engage with your audience. Start a poll. Okay. Scott says that explains Aussie politics. Yeah. Ask a question. Which pin format to use? And I'm going to make it in 18 pin or 20 pin dual ground plus spare, 20 pin single ground, no spare. Start poll. Okay. I have just started a poll. Now, I am probably going to ignore the poll, but anyway, the poll is up. Int equals reserve, 20 pins, more options for later is my vote, says Stephen. I'll leave the int pin as a user pin, they can do whatever they want with it. Michael says, voting, drinking and driving on the same day, what could possibly go wrong? Yeah. Some Call It Fun says, I think you covered that Python wouldn't be able to respond to an interrupt anyway. Yeah, if you move the int to the bottom right corner, it can be optional. So currently 20 pin dual ground plus spare is leading the vote with 64%. Doesn't add options if it is not handled on the carrier board. Yeah, as Simon pointed out. I don't want to overcomplicate this. This is my feeling right now. The voting is currently telling me to go for 20 pin. I am personally having a moderately strong preference for the 18 pin. Stephen said, voting, drinking, driving and full of sausage all on the same day. Can't forget the democracy sausage. Yeah. Yes. That's definitely what was meant by that. So I'm going to leave this here and leave the vote going. People are still saying, yeah, the vote is still on the 20 pin. I don't know if it's just me being contrarian, but the more people say it should be 20 pin, the less I want to do it. Okay, so I will show you what I've done on the conveyor. But first, yes, this is where I am going to be. I'm jumping on a plane during the week and going to this place, Heron Island, which is on the Barrier Reef off Gladstone. Going with both my sisters. We are, and a mutual friend, and we are going to be spending most of a week on this little island, which you could walk around in an hour comfortably, with no phone coverage, no internet. I'm told that you can actually pay for internet for a limited time. Like you can, it's like the old days where you pay for internet time, like in an internet cafe, and then you can get online for a little while. But the important thing is that most of the time, as much of the time as possible, I'm going to be underwater. So it's not even going to be relevant whether I've got internet or phone coverage, because I am going to be, let's see, let's look at images. I am going to be here on this little island with this wreck just near it. Look how amazing, look how idyllic this place looks. So this is my way of, oh, there's a stylized map. This actually gives you a better sense of the scale, the very small scale of this place. University of Queensland Research Station. So there is a marine research facility on this island, plus a few other buildings, some huts, and a swimming pool. Now, the thing is, this place is actually where I learned to scuba dive. I got my dive license here back in 1988. In the year of our Lord, 1988, I got my open water diving certification, and I have not been back to the island since. And so we are going back to where my diving adventure began. Stephen says, John will avoid the shipwrecks by flying in on his helicopter. No, we're going to be arriving by ferry. There is a little helipad there, but a complete guide for 2024. I haven't actually been to this. This cannot be real, but it is real. Heron Island is a paradise filled with natural beauty. Yeah, this gives you an idea of how crazy this place is. It is so amazing. And you can either get there on a helicopter or you can get there on a ferry. I'm just scrolling down looking for underwater shots. Yeah, turtles and stuff. Okay, so this is the stylized sort of map of the entire island. Ooh, Shark Bay, North Beach, the gantry. So I am going to be taking most of my dive gear with me. I'm not taking the tank because they have tanks available there as part of their air supply service. So I'm going to be, and tanks are too big and heavy to travel with. So I'm taking my my BCD, my regulator, mask, fins, all the basic stuff. I am not taking weights. So my buoyancy compensator has an integrated weight system, but the weights weigh a lot. It'd be a large part of my luggage my luggage weight allowance, just moving lead. So what I'm going to be doing is taking my BCD with the integrated weight pockets, and then I'm going to use their weights and just shove them in the pockets. Yeah, anyway, so next Sunday, when I should be live streaming, this is where I am actually going to be. So I will be live streaming 2 weeks from now, not 1 week from now. Stephen W says the airline probably doesn't want to carry a tank either. Yeah. Tozy Bob says I reckon a golf buggy would be better than a tank. Just saying. Yeah. We do not want to take a military tank. Also, who here knows the origins of the reason that it is called a tank? Have you ever actually stopped to think, like, a military tank, a big thing with armor on tracks that drives around and has a big gun on the front and people inside, although not so much these days, moving towards autonomous tanks. Does anybody here know why they are called tanks? Yes, there is actually a historical reason for that. It was like a tin can, says Crispian. No, that's not actually the reason. Yes, Stephen W says it was called a tank because that was the code name to avoid making it obvious what they were developing. That's right. It was a term that was used by the British during World War I, when they were developing the very first tanks, and they called them that because it was like a big steel container, and it was a way of avoiding information getting out about what they were building. So they could be welding up these big things and just say, oh, it's a tank. Yeah, it's a tank. That, like, as in like a fuel storage tank or something. But no, it goes on tracks and it drives around. So yes. Okay, so where is the poll up to? So the poll is currently saying 69% are voting for a 20-pin dual ground plus spare. Now, ooh, yeah, Jordan says yes, disguising what they were during World War II. It was actually World War I, I'm pretty sure. By World War II, everybody knew what a tank was. They very much knew. Anyway, let's not get into history too much. So, this all came out of a joke from Tassie Bob saying I should get a golf cart. Okay, so this is what I want to do. This is what people are telling me to do. So Some Call It Fun says, when you say spare, do you mean pin 2 is not connected right now? Yeah, so the consensus at the moment, just based on the vote, is that what I should do is use this footprint and just not connect the interrupt pin on pin 2. But then it's dual grounds, and the grounds are the same. I am very strongly leaning towards this. Thanks for the memories, Wagon Load says. It just seems unnecessary putting on a 20-pin thing, pre-assigning a dual ground when that doesn't actually gain anything, and having an interrupt
Outside
pin.
the box said, nice long stream, Jono. Almost enough to tide. Pardon the pun. It's over for 2 weeks.
Tied you over for 2 weeks, yeah. So stop watching 44 minutes ago, and then you've had your 2 hours, and then the rest can be for next week. Okay, let's go back to Fusion, and I'm going to show you conveyor, conveyor, yeah, This conveyor, the state that this conveyor project is in is, I don't like it, but I got to keep telling myself that it is a quick and dirty because I just need something to work. I don't want to overcomplicate things. I don't want to put too much polish into it and waste time. I just need to get to a result. So this is where the conveyor is currently up to. What have we got? Okay, so we have an ESP32S3. I have and USB. Then we've got the PCB sensors. The time of flight sensors are connected with the X-shut pins for each one because they're all on the same I2C address. Hence the whole discussion today. CAN bus interface we've got here. So we've got the isolated CAN transceiver. We've got CAN termination with the jumper. Piezo beeper. I added a drive transistor for this rather than driving it directly off the I/O pin as it was previously. I've got a status LED, which is a through-hole WS2812B with a pass-through connection for data going to an external stack light, which I probably won't use, but I've just got it there anyway because it's a header, so it costs nothing. I've put another header on here for an I2C panel. This is like quick connector pinout. 1, 2, 3, 4 being ground, power, SDA, SCL. Onboard OLED, so just like a 128 by 32 OLED, which could be used for doing things like displaying the IP address or the MQTT topic when it boots up. We've got the power supply, so we've got power coming in through a fuse, and based on Austin's feedback, I've replaced this with a little surface mount fuse holder, which you will see in a moment. Goes through e-stop, then we've got power switch going through a reverse protection diode into the regulator, gives us a 5 volt rail. From there we get a 3.3 volt rail. We've got I'll get back to the X-axis stepper. The Y-axis stepper, that's important. X-axis motor driver, we've got the H-bridge, we've got the limit sensor for zeroing the Y-axis. What I did was I added a 4-way dip switch with pull-ups going to pins on the micro, and the purpose of this is being able to set device IDs. So I'm going to end up with probably, so I'll have 3, 4, 5, I'm going to have at least 5 conveyors in my system, possibly 6. So I wanted a quick way of being able to say this is conveyor 1, this is a conveyor 2, conveyor 3, etc. So I just added a 4-way dip switch. So what I could do, that gives me 16 possible addresses. So yeah, I can tell, and that way what I can do is if I want to send a command to a particular conveyor, I can say that is conveyor 3, send it to device 3, and then device 3 will respond. And it can just be set with dip switches rather than having to reconfigure it through the firmware. The Y-axis stepper. Okay, so what I did was I took the ULN 2003, which is a Darlington transistor array, and I integrated it directly onto the PCB. Now, if we have a look at the PCB itself, which I have not yet finished routing, still you can see there's stuff just hanging around, doing nothing. You can see there are still air wires here that I need to route, and we can probably get a better idea looking at it like this. It's a view without the copper in the PCB. Ooh, we can look through it. So you can see the top and bottom layers of copper there. So we've got the 2 CAN bus connectors here. It's just pluggable screw terminals. That's where power comes in. And then the power switch. Then we've got the e-stop connector, which could just be a loopback. This is the surface mount carrier for a little pluggable fuse cartridge thingamajigamy. And USB is there. Then we've got, that's CAN termination on that jumper. There's the CAN transceiver. I've got a dip switch. This is the dip switch. This is a through-hole addressable RGB LED. The OLED sitting across the top, piezo with its drive transistor. This is the H-bridge that drives the DC motors for moving the front and back conveyor belts. These are the two outputs that go to those motors. We've got the 3 board detector headers there, which is just IDC headers. I've got over here, this is the header for the limit switch for homing for the Y-axis. And here we have the connection that goes to the stepper, and there is the Darlington transistor array, and these are LEDs showing activity on the 4 phases of the stepper motor. And this is an I2C plus power header, just because. So that is what really should be a quick connector, but I've just got a pin header thing there as a placeholder at the moment. I will probably replace that with a 1mm pitch JST header for quick compatibility. What else? Oh yeah, those holes there are where the stack light would plug in. Now the, oops, no, I want to go to the schematic. This driver is the equivalent circuit of what is on. So if you've got one of those little 28BYJ 48N or whatever they are, I can't remember the part number, stepper motors, and they come with a little driver board that you connect to your Arduino or whatever. So you plug the stepper into the driver board and then you connect the driver board to your microcontroller. This is what is on that driver board. The ULN2003 is the chip that is on the driver board. Normally they have like a DIP format in a socket, and all it is 7 transistor. It's just a 7-channel Darlington transistor thingamajigamy. So, and it just uses 4 of the 7 channels to drive the phases of the motor. So the motor has a constant 5 volts going to it. It's a 5-wire stepper motor with 4 phases with a constant 5 volts. And then the 4 phases are connected here to the, hang on, just a second, I've got someone at the door. Hang on. Hey Steve.
How you going?
Good. I'm on the stream at the moment. I'm just gonna wrap up. No, that's okay. Steve has arrived. So I'm gonna have to wrap up this stream in just a second, but this, yeah, so this is the summary of where the Y-axis stepper driver goes. And I did this so that I would not have to integrate that module. Like I wouldn't need to mount the module somewhere. And all I need to do is have the Darlington transistor array right here to drive it. So, yeah, I just need to finish the final little bit of routing on that. Maybe replace this header with the JST header, and yeah, and then I can send that off for fabrication.
Hi, Steve.
And yes, okay, that's it, I think. So now okay, the poll is going in the opposite direction to what I wanted. It is going now at 72% voting for the 20-pin header, and I don't want that. So I am going to defer this decision. You obviously think I should be doing a 20-pin header. I want to do an 18-pin header. I am going to think about it and then do what I want to do. Reverse confirmation bias. So yeah, I actually do not know what to do about this. I am now stuck in a decision loop between these 2 options. Having this dual ground, it just feels wrong, and having an int for no purpose feels wrong. I don't think anything is gained by going to this 20-pin header. Stephen says compromise and do a 19-pin. Yeah. Okay, so hang on, where am I? I've got to find OBS so that I can end this stream. So okay, I'm gonna go. Thank you for coming along and disagreeing with me on what that pin header what this header format should be. I don't know what to do. I am still now undecided, but at least I have two options now.
Outside the box said, Uru.
Yeah, Uru. Jack Stack said, then do the 18 pin, toss a coin, and if you don't like the outcome, then that proves your head thoughts. Yeah, I know that technique. That's like it's a little bit like a rubber ducky thing. It's commit to a path, and if it feels wrong, you know you made the wrong decision. But until you commit to a path, you don't know if it was wrong. So, I really think I'm going to go for the 18 pin.
Scott Miller said, see ya in a couple weeks, John.
Yeah, thanks, Scott. Okay, I'm going to hit the end button now, and I'm going to go and talk to Steve. So, thanks for coming. Have a great 2 weeks, and I will talk to you all later. See ya.